Nike, they're obviously going to be less concerned about it. For all these brands and retailers, labor rights issues are a question of risk management. These companies don't undergo moral epiphanies and become human rights activists. And the greater the perception of reputational risk, the more aggressively the risk will be managed. But I also think it's important to bear in mind that it's a matter of degree. And I disagree with the implicit assumption in April's question that somehow Nike is now dedicated to uplifting workers in its factories. It's risk management for Nike the same way it is for Walmart. Nike manages it more aggressively, in some ways in a more sophisticated fashion. Nike is not at a point where it actually wishes to transform the working conditions, and God forbid the wages. In these factors, and bear in mind, and this is critical, it's obvious that we cited sometimes in our discussion, brands like Nike, retailers like Wal-Mart are not in China, despite the fact that China has no unions, low wages, and large labor rights. They're because of these things. So we have to bear this in mind when we think about why is Nike not pushing harder for the Chinese government to do X, Y, Z. But I think it gets back to the point in question where it's your presentation, because I think it's an extremely valuable schematic. But I think the piece of it I want to ask you about is the extent to which you looked at the way that the monitoring processes that you examined are a function of the intention of the corporate entities that are bringing the monitoring about. Which I think is...
I think that's exactly right, but I have to say, what really troubles in both Wal-Mart and Coverco, the monitors themselves actually did their best to create the best monitoring system they can. And I actually, I could go on, the Coverco people in particular won't investigate a company that they can't, they want an 18-month contract for it to be able to have access to for 18 months. They go back repeatedly, there are surprise visits, they meet with the workers on the site, they do everything that you would want monitors to do. But ultimately, any remediation at the factory depends on the brand. And Coverco has no way to force the brand to push the subcontractor to do anything. And so what you see again and again is Coverco essentially disappointing the workers because it carries the workers' concerns to the brand and nothing, or to the consumer groups, and nothing happens, which is, I think, why those tensions become so visible. I also repeatedly saw the brands abandoning the factories where Coverco revealed problems. That running away problem is really severe, and I think Nike is more guilty of it at this point than even it probably was in the past, because it's so scared that risk management often means leaving the factory rather than actually fixing the problem. And it just seems to me that our whole system of stateless regulation and voluntary processes overlooks the fact that these brands are there to make money. And while you're right, what you said earlier about how little labor costs are for the brands, every penny you save on every t-shirt translates into millions of dollars when you sell millions of t-shirts. And the local managers have much more concern about saving that penny than maybe the people in New York do. And it just seems to me that we ignore the incentives within the supply chain to reduce costs when we focus on CSR. And when we talk to the CSR people, when we talk to people in the CSR office, who really are well-intentioned and really need it, they don't actually control what the company actually does. Very, very well-intentioned corporate CSR people rarely have any control over corporate decision-making. And that's why I always find working within the supply chain as a basic approach to labor rights problematic, because you're not addressing the power structure within the company.
Can I ask a question? Do you have a good example of some country where suddenly the powerful people lost their power?
I do. Okay. South Africa, for example. It's really interesting in South Africa.
You may happen to know, South Africa, I haven't studied, worked on the Nelsen Commission for Labor. The real wages of South African workers have been falling since the change.
Actually, only because they now include the entire population in the census.
And I would never have picked South Africa as a place where the workers are better off than they were before, where COSATU, that is at odds with the government, it's an interesting switch you made. There was the one change in And since then, I think things have been going downhill.
You know, I have to say that I'm biased on this because my twin sister is the economist for COSATU and has been for years. So, and she's now, and I'm very involved in South African stuff. So I think that getting citizenship in South Africa and having a labor law where union rights are respected has transformed workplaces across South Africa. And I think you can see it in the way, I think the most recent example is the South African Union of Mine Workers, which went on strike for better health and safety stuff. So there's very high unemployment rates in South Africa, absolutely, which has more to do with privatization and the restructuring of the economy than it does with the accession of labor rights. But in the unionized factories, and in unionized workplaces in South Africa, there is no question that workers are better off now than they were in, say, 1988. And they would absolutely say that getting democratic rights, having a labor department that will interfere, that will enforce contracts, where they can actually take their employer to a labor arbitration system that works, makes a huge difference in their lives.
Well, I disagree about the success of that particular economy.
I'm biased.
Yeah, I guess I liked what you had to say about like government laundering and activists like influencing governments. But I guess what as an activist, as someone who's more interested in like actually getting things done on the ground, I would be curious to hear some of your ideas of like how that can be effective, because I think that a lot of times these monetary organizations arise because they're pragmatic. Like how do I, as a student, it's a much smaller thing to attack, you know, to have my institution have to go through some sort of certification, they could have my institution have to attack X government. And then, so that would be like a critique, but I'd also be interested to hear in what ways you think this would be effective.
So if you thought about your activism more in terms of educating students around here than simply in terms of what pressure you could actually put on corporations, then you're being incredibly effective. You're already being incredibly effective. That clothing line thing that you did is brilliant. You know, it makes people aware of the impact of globalization. In fact, that's where most of your energy goes. If you do a DSP kind of program, where you get the university committed to working in specific factories where the conditions are, you know, really improved, that's really a fabulous impact. And I promise you, it would involve looking at countries where labor unions are relatively strong and probably where national labor laws are pretty well enforced, at least within that factory. So you would effectively be doing that. But there are other things you can do. For example, I think it would be completely legitimate. In fact, at the University of Wisconsin, we have done this. We've gotten we've made sure that there's no clothing made in Burma anywhere in any university facilities because it's under ILO sanctions. It's really easy. There's some countries where labor laws are simply not enforced. So that kind of strategy is one that you could think about taking further. There are a few countries quite as bad as Burma.
Only one, two quick ones. I think that ineffective as they may be, codes of corporate responsibility have an ideological function, which they put out there on the agenda that there is a sort of international responsibility for labor rights, although this may not be the mechanism to do it. And actually, one proof of that pudding is, believe it or not, Wal-Mart is being attacked from the right in the U.S. There are people, a Heritage Foundation and certain other groups who attack Wal-Mart for its international codes and for making a kind of, even domestically, a kind of assertion that it environmentally and also labor. And the reason is because they had a tremendous investment in the sense that the Wal-Mart revolution in retailing was in and of itself, bringing a higher standard of living to Americans because of the price-wage differential. I mean, the price-wage, reconfiguration. And I saw this, believe it or not, at the Walmart annual meeting in Bentonville last June. So that's important. So like the Helsinki Accords, which were thought to be totally ineffective when they're put in effect in the mid-70s, but actually provide a sort of ideological standard. But I totally agree with you that the ineffectiveness has to be. The second thing is this, I just want to enter in on this question. I'm actually mainly interested in Walmart in the US, not abroad. Why is it that Walmart and other companies are so resistant to raising wages a penny or two, or increasing the price of their products, a penny or two, which might allow workers to get $1 or $2 extra wages? I think it's this. It's not that they're going to lose market share, or the few cents it goes up. It's not that. But that when you have workers who are better paid, they get a stake in the company. They feel they have a career.